The Exorcist Believer is directed by David Gordon Green and stars Ellen Bernstein, Leslie Odom Jr., and Ann Dowd. When two girls go missing and return 3 days later, they exhibit strange and demonic behavior which forces their families to seek help from people who have experienced this before. Even though I didn't see the first Exorcist until very recently, seeing all of the trailers for this movie months beforehand, I actually found myself very excited for this movie. All of the trailers for this film looked very eerie, and they really focused heavily on those black and white images that snapshot throughout all of the last moments of all of the trailers. I found the technique very interesting and very subconsciously creepy, which gave me real high hopes for this movie, despite what many critics, especially on Rotten Tomatoes, were giving this movie. I was really hoping they were all going to be wrong and I was going to side a lot with the film. And man, even as someone who didn't grow up loving the original Exorcist, this was a huge disappointment. Are there good things about this movie? Of course there are. Just not enough. Alright, good things. First of all, the makeup in this movie is fantastic. I mean, it's no Reagan from the original Exorcist, but the prosthetics used on the two main girls in this movie look so good and so creepy and just so ewy and gooey, and ooh, I just love it. It's nothing we haven't seen before, but when comparing it to the original possession makeup from the first Exorcist, this ain't half bad. Some of the cinematography is also pretty good. There are a lot of good tracking shots and wide shots that really do make you feel a bit uneasy, especially with just how symmetrical a lot of these wide and tracking shots are. Also, without giving anything away, I will say that ending had balls that I did not expect this movie to have, and I will leave it at that. Alright, so let's get into all of the not so good things about this movie, starting with the characters. The characters in this movie are bland as hell. I remember in the first Exorcist, all of the characters, while they didn't have the most exposition towards them, you felt their personalities and you spent so much time with them that you really did feel bad for them as the movie built to the overall possession storyline. Here, unfortunately, you don't get to spend a lot of time with any of the characters. It all feels very rushed. You see the characters as they are, you see them during the 3 days of missing, and then you see them return along with immediately they're possessed. The first half of this movie felt so rushed that it came at the cost of all of its character development. And speaking of wasted characters, let's talk about Chris. She returns in this movie. Why? I don't know. She shows up in the middle of the movie for like 10 minutes and then she's gone. Literally all of the scenes that you see in the trailers involving her character is all that's in the movie. Man, I thought Sally from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot felt wasted. Here, man, at least Sally gave the characters a literal shotgun to use against Leatherface. Here, there is literally no reason for Chris to be here with the exception of just exposition. And speaking of that exposition, it's not just the usual exposition dump to get the plot going. It is, oddly enough, exposition dump to get the message out there. There are many times throughout this movie where the characters will just flat out say the message of the movie during montages, and it just comes off as pandering to the audience. But when you get down to it, the original Exorcist is still praised to this day as being possibly the scariest film ever made. Does this movie hold a candle to that? No. If you watched my Exorcist 73 review, you remember that I praised how that movie used jump scares and shock horror to its betterment. Here, all of the reasons why I said those scares worked better than in modern movies, this movie decides to use the modern movie equivalent instead of the Exorcist equivalent. Just tons of overblown music and sound design to convey to the audience what you're watching is scary, instead of just letting the scare speak for itself. And along with a first half that feels ungodly rushed, you also have a last half of the movie that feels like it just goes on and on and on, trying to replicate the overly extended exorcism scene of the first movie, But in this film, with characters that you care so little about, you don't give two shits if they live or escape. Sure, in concept, the ending is kind of cool, but when the movie that built up to it is so bland and boring, it feels like the ending is completely wasted. Guys, this movie is just disappointingly bad. Sure, the makeup is good, the cinematography is decent, and the ending is kind of interesting, but when the movie has boring characters, no good scares, and pacing that is all over the place, all of those pros feel like wasted opportunities. I just found it disappointing and just flat out bad. I can only imagine what a hardcore Exorcist fan must feel about this movie. I'm going to give The Exorcist Believer a D-. Well guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more Halloween-centered reviews as I will be reviewing a fan favorite of so many around this time of season. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best, and don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell icon down below to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.